expected between the two countries. I think economic dimension of the relationship between the two countries will undoubtedly increase. Movement toward greater interdependence is evidenced by an export and import trade growth in 1970 from $10.5 billion to $51.5 billion in 1980. Japan continues as the second largest foreign market for the United States, next to Canada, while the United States continues as Japan's largest trading partner. The steady growth in long-term capital flows should further strengthen the process of bilateral economic interdependence. This progressive interfacing of national economies is only reinforced by the mutual national security interest of Japan and the United States in East Asia and globally. However, increasing interdependence may not preclude problems in trade relations in the 1980s. The above trend may not easily alter the basic structure of U.S.-Japanese trade, in which the United States exports substantial amounts of both primary commodities and manufactured goods to Japan, while Japanese sales are overwhelmingly of manufactured goods. As generally recognized now, a major explanation of asymmetries in U.S.-Japan trade structures can be found in the different industrial structures of both countries. Obviously, the manufacturing sector in Japan must be emphasized in a country with relative no indigenous natural resources, a little arable land, and a large population. Japan must promote those industries characterized by high value content and high labor productivity in order to obtain the foreign currency for importation of natural resources and foodstuffs. It's therefore not unnatural that the United States, as a major exporter of primary products, should sell such items to Japan. It seems to me what has been surprising and a growing concern to many Americans is Japan's ability to export and sell well-designed, high-quality finished goods at very competitive prices. Between 1960 and 1977, the share of machinery, such as televisions, automobiles, tape recorders, as a percentage of Japan's total exports to the United States increased from 17.1% to 68%. And the share of steel increased from 14 to 16.8. And conversely, the share of textiles fell dramatically from 26.6 to 3.6%. However, the U.S. trade structure to Japan has not quantitatively changed as much in the same period. Although the share of raw materials and fuels have decreased from 57.1 to 40.3. Food product share has increased from 7.9 to 21.8%. The share of manufacturers has shifted slightly from 33.1 to 37.9%. Changing trends in U.S. industrial structure have also only occurred at a measured pace. Economic activity continues to shift away from the manufacturing sector into service industries and the public sector. Although manufacturing remains proportionately the largest and most conspicuous sector in the U.S. economy, it has experienced somewhat inefficiency in some industries with regard to labor productivity or capital investment. Similarly, U.S. agriculture has shrunk by growing much more efficiently. Lastly, the tertiary level systems of transportation or distribution kind of things remain well developed in the United States, unlike in Japan. As implied, the trade effects generated by factors such as different trade and industrial structures have been underscored by the trend of low U.S. productivity growth rates relative to trading partners. There has been growing tendencies among Americans to conclude, as I said, that Japan will surpass the United States as the world's world leading industrial power. Business circles in recent years have been eager to learn some secret of Japan's economic success. Although the Japanese experience could perhaps contribute somewhat to the U.S. economy, but I don't think Japan is or will ever be number one, as Professor Vogel, Harvard University asserts. Surely Japan has succeeded in making great progress in its economy thus far. Well, many reasons have been said. Probably those are already said, partly true. Let's say good relationship between business and government, labor management, cooperation, kind of things. But it's also true that several traditional Japanese industrial sectors will confront increasing difficulties in 1980s. These difficulties will originate from the newly industrialized countries, such as Taiwan and Korea and other neighboring countries, Japan. These newly industrialized countries will challenge not only the mature industries of shipbuilding and textiles, but also such basic industries as steel, automobiles, and TVs in the near future. In addition, Japan experiences the growing difficulties caused by astronomical increases in energy prices in the petrochemical and aluminum industries. These industries, moreover, has been quite problematic because they have lost price competitiveness since the 1973 oil crisis. Such a development could conceivably lead Japan to play less of a competitive role vis-à-vis some maturing U.S. industries. Japanese policy responses will primarily aim at restoring the balance between supply and demand in the adjustment process of structurally declining industries. Additional impetus to a changing Japanese industrial structure should develop with an average aging of our labor force and with somewhat widening inter-industry differentials in economic consensus. That field already pointed out. On the other hand, what is most needed for envisagement of the 1980s trade relationship is a realistic assessment of the relative strengths of the U.S. economy and industries. It's very strange for the American expert to talk about Japanese, and I am not an expert on the U.S. economy, but I'm not going to talk about the U.S. economy. First, one strength pertains to an overemphasis on the relative decline of U.S. economic performance in terms of labor productivity, corporate and public R&D expenditures, savings, and real capital investment. My impression is that preoccupation with declining U.S. relative growth rate has resulted in a somewhat imbalanced assessment of the U.S. economy. Albeit that relative growth rate declines are analytically important, the overall viability of the U.S. economy is maintained by absolute levels in the various measurement categories that far exceed comparable foreign levels. Second, with regard to Japan, trade problems arising from strong foreign competition pertain only to some maturing industries. Some relief can be induced by short-term measures limiting the level of foreign exports, but only with an acceptably high economic cost if maintained over the long run. Thus, the most mature U.S. industries, such as textiles, have moved toward greater end product specialization. Such effort can only increase the international competitiveness. Third, some U.S. mature industries now facing competitive pressures are far from losing their long-term competitiveness. The U.S. auto industry is foremost in this category. Given its projected capital expenditures, equipped modernization program, and new car designs, and I believe the auto industry and its related industries will remain a vibrant component of the American economy. It's only a question of time. It might take some time. As a foreign observer of the American scene, I'm surprised that a fourth strength of the U.S. economy is often overlooked. That is, the substantial lead the United States enjoys in several industrial sectors, which have established the United States as the major competitor in those sectors. For example, a consistently high R&D expenditure should ensure the American lead in computer technology. Further advancement in this most basic of high technology industries can only benefit numerous other industries incorporating microprocessing capabilities into their production processes, products, or services. Comparative lead in aircraft, aerospace, communication should maintain their competitive strengths, I think, throughout the 1980s. And service industries will expand further into domestic and international markets. The final strength is American development of new industries. Even though the precise futures of such industries as genetic engineering, biotechnology, or alternative energy cannot now be discerned, their economic potentials and spin-offs are indeed promising and significant. In any case, what will perhaps be a necessary condition is a return by U.S. industry to its traditional commitment to long-term project planning and risk-taking. Those strengths are inherent to the U.S. economy and should affect the type and degree of trade competition experienced in U.S.-Japanese relations. At another level, the U.S. economy may benefit from external development. For instance, my understanding is that any country in an increasingly interdependent world economy would face insurmountable obstacles if it should attempt or expect to achieve a comparative advantage in all industrial sectors. This attempt or expectation assumes that industrial development of other countries would remain static or relatively adynamic. Instead, cooperative projects should be exploited as a natural economic factor containing positive opportunities for both parties. In this context, performance by individual U.S. industries could benefit from an increasing number of cooperative R&D or manufacturing projects with the foreign counterparts. I think in this area, future arrangement could occur between firms engaged in semiconductors, microelectronics, or robotics in computers. Obviously, the regenerative efforts by U.S. industry will be a major determinant of U.S.-Japanese economic relations in the 1980s. For our part, the Japanese can shape the relationship by policies with indirect and direct effects. At a general level, the Japanese must further the trend toward greater assumption of responsibility in international affairs. We have long experienced a kind of perceptual lag in terms of our economic power, impact on other economies, and our role in international decision making. And as to specific measures, a steady increase in the rate of Japanese investment in the United States is anticipated. Further technical cooperation would be available to those industries adversely affected by foreign competition. The promotion of foreign manufacturers to Japan should develop along with the new American awareness of the value of exports and competitive strengths. Oh, I'm getting a little bit of time. True policy developments, however, would be severely detrimental to U.S.-Japanese relations in the 1980s. That is, excessive politicization of economic issues. This would only exacerbate U.S.-Japanese trade relations, perhaps to the point of reducing mutual understanding. Dispute on trade issues, which are inevitable in process of increasing interdependence and industrial adjustment, and their linkage to other issues, would only heighten differences and narrow the range of possible agreement. The second development, of course, would be an increasing recourse to protectionist measures
to alleviate the industrial effects of foreign competition. Surely the domestic political issues raised by foreign trade will not disappear in the 1980s. They are especially potent for the industrialized democracies and their choice to conduct economic relations on free trade principles. Any substantial movement toward a general policy of protectionism would provide for only short-term relief at long-term economic cost, while running the extreme risk of collapsing the present world political economy by a breakdown in international norms, rules, and procedures. In conclusion, the elements of competition and cooperation will be present as U.S.-Japanese economic relations develop in the 1980s. Step toward management of the relationship will require better bilateral coordination, while other steps by their nature can only be implemented unilaterally. Lastly, mutual management of the relationship will be diminished, if not precluded, by excessive politicization of trade and by a policy response to protectionism. Thank you very much.
Mr. Nakagawa is in New York, Bill and Ellen are in Washington. I thought we were going to have some difficulty getting together on a common theme, and I thought I was going to have a real problem at the end of trying to pull together three separate speeches. Try and state a common thread to it, but it seems that there is a common thread here, and that is that both Bill and Ellen see the Japanese economy is very, very strong, although for different reasons. Mr. Nakagawa sees the American economy is very strong, and all three seem to agree that there's going to be some problems in the future, but there's nothing there that can't be resolved, and that Japanese-American relations are a strength in both countries. Let me stop there. Throw the floor open to questions from you. I'm sure you have some. Let's go. Over here. Yes. You. Up.
Space policy, and what the Japanese movements to the scale of the future of space industrialization may be for their economy.
What kind of space?
Space,
You mean satellites?
sunlight.
Way up or space in cities? Satellites.
In Japan, space, I mean the physical space. It is very important factor since we have a very small, narrow land. But talking about space, I'm not an expert on that, but surely in the area of high technology, well, let me put it this way. We have industrial vision in 1980s, which was presented by Industrial Structure Council, which is an advisory organ to the Japanese ministry. In that vision, in 1980s, Japanese economy should pursue the high technology, but we call it knowledge-intensive industry. And in that context, we would like to promote space industry too. But as I said, the space industry or aircraft in these areas are so weak in Japanese economy, and I think it will really long time for the Japanese to be in real competition with the American industries in such areas. Probably, if we are determined to go into that, and I think it is extremely difficult task for the Japanese right now, especially the space industry.
I
just wanted to be a little more optimistic about it. It seems that Japan has the infrastructure for it, and all it really has to do is to decide that it wants it. It has the robotics, it has the avionics, it has the steel industry. So essentially, what it just takes is the time and the determination. From what I understand, it also is right now is negotiating and has co-production with Boeing on several military aircraft. So I'd see it maybe in 10 or 15 years, which in the sequence of international trade is not all that long.
Well, that depends upon the definition of space industry. I thought satellites and the project that requires a massive amount of money that NASA's already spent. In that scale, I don't think it's possible. But talking about the aircraft, well, we produced the Japanese airplane, which was called YS-11, and that was a kind of failure. Now we are taking some participation in producing a Boeing 7674 mid-range airplane. We participated in that work, but just the 15% work is given to the Japanese side, and we are now engaged in producing probably the body side or the tail. It's a kind of peripheral functions of the airplane. So that's the current stage of that industry. Probably, well, maybe in the future we might go into that area too, but I think it will take really long time.
You will excuse me, because I have missed many of the previous sessions as a member of the council. So I'm going to take advantage of my not having been here during the past to ask each of you one question. For you. How was it possible for the top echelon of the Japanese infrastructure to be destroyed after the war, instead of the base falling into disarray? It came out vigorous and productive. What could the Americans have been learned from Japan on that object? That is for you.
If I have the question, and that's my problem.
You want me to repeat it?
May I see if I understand the question? You're saying with the physical destruction, nevertheless, the infrastructure in the sense of the political dimension?
No, you told us at the end of the war,
yes,
that the top structure of the Japanese industry,
yes,
was destroyed, leaving the individual manager freedom to operate.
Yes.
Am I right?
Okay.
Did I understand you correctly?
Yes, you did.
I thank you.
Yes. Yes. What I was saying, yes, that I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. That the top structure of the corporations, this holding, a holding company. A holding company is a company which exists to control other companies, hold stocks and appoint officers and various other control devices. These top holding companies of these enormous conglomerate combines were dissolved. That we did do. And that then left, in the case of the Mitsui Zaibatsu, there were roughly, every submission to MacArthur was slightly different in number, but roughly, let us say, about 340 corporations in that combine. And those 340 corporations then stood on their own 2 feet. Their boards of directors became boards of directors. Prior to this action, the key subsidiaries establishing the product breadth of the combines. They went from banking to insurance to steel to chemicals to shipbuilding, electrical machinery, and so on and so forth, trading companies. The key subsidiaries establishing the product breadth had to sign agreements with these top holding companies in a society which is non-contractual. Nevertheless, there were contractual agreements signed saying that these boards, even though they were boards of directors, would not exercise the powers of boards of directors without first getting guidance from the top holding company. That is what we did achieve in that program, and it put the component corporations on their own 2 feet, and the increased rivalry from this occurring, I think, has been one of the post-war strengths to that economy. I had just to add one further thought, having been rather bloodied in the field of battle at the time this was going on, I found it almost unbelievable in 1971 to sit opposite the president of the Federation of Economic Organizations, the K. Don Wren, and have him say in his judgment the dissolution of those top holding companies had been a major factor in Japan's high growth. That was a really rather profound experience.
For you.
Right here. Fire away.
Yours is short and sharp. Short and sharp.
Short and sharp.
What would you tell this audience was the basic reason or factors that brought about the inequality of compensation between the males in Japan? The females receive less, and the males receive more. Was it based on education or what?
Good question. Good question. Eleanor remarked in her early comments that wage levels between men and women are different. Well, they're different because women produce less.
Phil is in very respectable company saying that, but this comes from economists believing that everybody gets one's marginal product in wage. If one doesn't start out with that mental framework, but starts out actually looking empirically, I'm not sure that one ends there.
Dr. Sala, would you please tell us in your own way why the Japanese, after they have lost almost everything at the end of World War II, came out from nowhere and become today the second strongest economic power in the world, whereas those other non-European societies who have been older than Japan are still living from hand to mouth.
That's the subject of about 3 or 4 books. Mine will be short and sharp. They lost everything except the most important thing: the will to produce and the ability to produce. Those things you couldn't take away. That's in somebody's head. And they had it. The rest of it was all just a matter of pulling the stuff together and rebuilding. Now that's no small task. The most important thing they had. That was the education of it.
My friend, you and I know, and everybody seems to know, that Japan does not have its own mineral or natural resources. It's an island empire, an island country. What do you think is Japan's concern with respect to the projected destruction of the Don? The Don. If the Cold War eventually becomes hot war, what do you think Japan, what will be the reaction of your country?
Well, any country is going to be in the difficulties, but well, it's of course, Japan is very vulnerable to, getting supply of natural resources such as petroleums. 99.7% of oil has to be imported from countries, and 80% of those are coming from the Middle East. And as you know, Middle East is one of the most unstable areas. And that Japanese economy is now standing on that basis. That we already knew that. So we have been promoted to increase our stockpiling ability, such as in the areas of petroleums or other important metals. It's growing rather rapidly, but of course it's very in somewhat shortage for some kind of real emergency occurs. And of course, the best solution is not to have a disruption in any part of the world. And I think U.S. and Japan could cooperate with each other in that area too. Often we have been pointed out that Japanese defense effort has been neglected for many years. And this has a long history because after the World War II, we had a constitution which was really originally introduced by the U.S. occupation forces, and in that constitution we have a kind of peace articles, and we have been prohibited to have a right of fighting with foreign countries, and in that legislation we have brought up so-called self-defense forces. We are not calling armies or navies. And the absolute level of defense GMP is upon the continent, because of the instability of the North, and because of the threat of foreign powers over the Japanese, and now gradually going into increase our efforts in that area too.
The hour grows late. Somebody get it comments one-on-one. Let me turn the meeting over to
Well, on behalf of the members and our guests, we certainly do express our deep appreciation of the time that you've so graciously given to us, the information you've shared for us. Thank you very much.